forget to mute myself. We've been doing this pandemic working from home for 10 months and I still forget to unmute myself. Welcome, I'm Faiza Venzant and here with my colleague, Erin Spink. We're so excited to have been invited here by SAVMA and so excited to see people from all over the US and Canada joining us today. So Erin, I'm gonna just get my screen share happening if you wanna distract them with your brilliance.
I don't think that was very brilliant, but yeah. Why don't we start with like a little introduction? So Faiza's going to tell a really funny and quite embarrassing story for me about how we met. But in the meantime, my name's Erin Spink. I've had the pleasure of knowing and working alongside Faiza for, I think, over a decade now. And I currently work in my day job at the Canadian Cancer Society. And I also have some side hustle stuff that I do with Spink Tank. And I know many of you from interactions we've had, whether you've written or have contributed in some way to things like Engage, formerly e-volunteerism, or the top 10 or top 20 ideas in volunteer engagement. So really excited to have some familiar faces and some new friends to meet and get to chat with today.
Well, thank you, Erin. And so what Erin didn't tell you is we actually met, it will be 12 years ago this year. No, it'll be 12 years ago this year that we met. We met at a conference in Ottawa, and at that conference, Erin and I both joined a board together. So we were new board members, and at the time, we were living about a 10-minute drive from each other. And so, me being the extrovert that I am, we were getting ready for our very first board meeting. I called Erin and I said, hey, I'm going to be driving up to this meeting, which was about, 40 minutes outside of the city. Do you want to take a ride with me? And Erin, tell the good people what you said.
I think I already have a ride, but thanks anyways.
So she rejected my ride, wasn't willing to take a risk driving with me. And then we had an incredible board meeting. And at the end of the board meeting, I said, Erin, do you want to ride home? And I had won her over. She had, in that one short board meeting, I had gained her confidence that she could get in a car with me and I would safely drive her home. And the rest is history. We fell in love and have been volunteering and, partnering together in our profession wherever we can, and learning from each other and challenging each other and helping each other to grow.
Yeah.
So that's how we know each other and how we came together today. And today we really wanted to talk to you about risk and what that means to both of us in our personal volunteer engagement practice, but also in the context of the Volunteer Management Hybrid Conference that took place this fall. I was part of the conference in terms of presenting the conference, and Erin attended the conference as a participant. And so we both we were texting throughout the conference and each night, and we were both coming away with very different learnings and thought it would be really interesting to share that with you. But before we get started, we're going to be using a technology today called Menti, and we just wanted to practice using this technology with all of you before we got started. And so if you have not used Menti before, the way that you use it is by going to www.menti.com. You can do that if you're on a device in another window, or you can do it on your phone in another window, however you choose to do it. And you would type in the code 2505316 and then follow the prompt. So I'm going to ask everyone to do that. And then take a look at the screen once you've submitted your answer. And today being Thankful Thursday, the question is, using one word, what are you thankful for today? If you've attended any of my sessions before, you know that gratitude and practicing gratitude is a big part of my life and my practice in volunteer engagement, in terms of volunteer appreciation and recognition, motivation. All right, I love what I'm seeing.
Oh, these are all beautiful things to be thankful for.
Yeah, teammates, sunshine.
Teammates, partnership, clouds, good books. Ooh, that's one of my favorites.
Yeah, yarn. I feel like that might be you, Liza Dyer. Yarn or books. I'm trying to guess who said what here. Rest. So important right now as well as rest. And so I want to acknowledge that, we are kind of, we are in this pandemic, even though it's been for most of us 10 months in this pandemic. It's so important for us to do what little things we can, little or big, to take care of ourselves so that we can take care of our communities and, have the energy and the enthusiasm for the really important work that all of us are doing. And so that's why I think gratitude and giving thanks is so very important. All right, so looks like this group is going to have no problem at all using Menti. Excellent. All right, I'm going to move on. Sunset, sunshine, and rain. Love it. So today we have 3 goals in mind, and although Erin and I are going to be in conversation for part of this, you're all going to be in conversation for a lot of this as well. We're going to do some breakout rooms and hopefully learn a lot from each other and share with each other. One of the wonderful things that I mentioned before about this pandemic is that it's giving us a chance to join each other's associations, learn together, meet people from around North America, and in some cases, all around the world, and share learning. So I encourage you, when you're in your breakout rooms, if somebody says something and you think that you might want to learn a little bit more from them, maybe a 15-minute call or a 30-minute call in the next couple weeks, if you think that would be useful for you, don't be afraid to private chat that person, or just say, is that, I loved what you just said. Is that something that I can connect with you afterwards, and let today's learning go on and, become a bigger learning than just what you experienced today. So we're hoping to dispel myths around risk management. Not everything that's scary or uncomfortable is risk. Some stuff is not risk, it's just icky stuff. And some stuff is actually really being strategic and thinking about managing risk. Understanding your role as a leader of volunteers in proactively managing risk. So what is in your hands, and what do you have influence and agency over? And lastly, understanding the strengths and opportunities that arise with a willingness to take risk. Erin, did you want to add anything before we move on?
No, I loved what you said about, really making a point to reach out to people. And I mean, look at how well it turned out for me. I've got a beautiful 12-year friendship and someone that I admire and who inspires me and lifts me up. So, you never know where that one little outreach can lead. So that's the biggest risk that I would encourage you to take tonight. Or I
Awesome.
guess this afternoon, depending on where you are.
Thanks, Erin. Okay. So, Heidi, this is where your expertise comes in. We are going to put everybody into some breakout rooms for about 10 minutes, maybe 4 people per room for about 10 minutes. And we're just going to ask you each to take 2 minutes or so to introduce yourself and answer the question. If you didn't have to worry about risk, what is the first thing that you would change about volunteer involvement in your workplace or volunteer career? And Erin, what would yours be?
Oh, I think I would. Well, I mean, I'd say normally I'd speak up more, but those that know me know that that's actually not a problem for me. So I think just pushing harder about risks that we should be taking and investments that we should be making.
Wonderful. And I'll share mine when we come back from the small group discussion. So Heidi, if you can work your magic and
all right,
get us into some breakout rooms.
Rooms are opening up. So go ahead and join. It's working okay. Gary, were you not assigned a room? Let me see here. Did you get an option to join? There we go. And Faiza, you were muted if you were saying something to me.
I still forget to unmute.
Same.
I just thought I would wait back. I didn't know if Erin was going to or not, but
Okay, it looks like she went into a room.
that's cool.
And I'll put the prompt in there.
I didn't know Heather is on mute, but I don't know if Heather wanted to join a room or not. I think Heather might have stepped away from her computer. So we put it for 10 minutes?
Yeah, we can, I'll start a timer.
Yeah.
Do about 8 more maybe.
Oh, Heather said that she didn't want to get into a breakout room right now. She's just multitasking in her office today.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Great. It looks like all the rooms have at least 3 people in them. This Menti thing is so cool. I need to start using this in meetings.
It's really fun, and they have a lot of different layouts and ways in which people can participate, and you can create something in PowerPoint and then bring it in so that you don't lose like the fonts and the graphics and all that, because Menti's very this is the only screen that's like a Menti screen. Everything else is a PowerPoint. So it's really great. Yeah. There's also a really cool another one that I use called Kahoot, which is
oh yeah, the quiz thing.
That one's really fun.
It's fun.
Yeah.
We have had to get creative to make these fun things. What did you guys do for your mixer yesterday?
We had we did some breakout rooms. We had quite a few like updates and things that we wanted to do as well. Yeah, so it was just like we all just got on, did some updates, and then I think we did 2 or 3 breakout rooms. I can't remember. And then came back to it, and then also just took some questions on some of the things that we presented as well, which was good.
Nice.
And it was really lovely. Like there were people from all over the world, and yeah, 50, 55 or 52 or 55, I can't remember, people.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah. And it was nice because it was like around this time of night, so 6 to 7:30 Eastern time. And it was really nice to see the number of people in that time zone that, you know, even though it was the end of the workday, they still wanted to come. That was really nice.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm just trying to find this blurb on my phone here. Heidi, have you heard of, did Diane already have her surgery, or does she have it coming up?
I'm not sure. I think it's coming up,
Coming up. Okay.
but I know it's around this time.
Yeah.
I'm gonna grab a glass of water while I can.
Okay.
All right, looks like we've got just under 2 minutes left. So all right, I'm gonna go ahead and close the rooms.
Okay.
And Graciela, you came just in time. We're just closing up these breakout rooms. So welcome back. Welcome back, everybody. Got a few more people still in the rooms.
Good conversations going on.
Anything you wanted to share from your room, Erin?
Well, just it was a pleasure to chat with the ladies, and we all work in very different areas, and yet it's interesting how some of our mindsets are very attuned in terms of, we often think of risk as like physical risk, right? And things like that. Our
Mhm.
brains go in certain directions when we think of the word risk.
So true. And I think we also oftentimes think about risk in terms of punishment, and sort of like what are the things that could go wrong, or what are the things that we may suffer punitively if we
Yeah,
don't think about it, instead of like what are the opportunities that could be
yeah,
presented,
yeah,
and that positive
yeah.
side
It's
that.
always that negative mental, yeah, the negative mode. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
All right. Well, Erin, do you want to introduce our next quick poll?
Yeah, thank you. So, we know that there's a range of people that are joining us. So we wanted to find out from you, just so we can kind of customize some of our conversations. But how many of you actually attended the hybrid conference? And if you are on Menti, you don't have to put in another code. Although if you haven't joined Menti yet, you just put in the code at the top there. But you should be able to just hit refresh, and it'll take you to the next slide if it hasn't already. So interesting. All right. So this is actually, Faiza, this is a little bit different than what we were anticipating, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. We thought there'd be more people that had attended the hybrid management. That's cool. So we'll get to share, more about the conference with people that didn't get to attend. So that's great.
And I'll take this time right now just to plug the 2021 conference, which is going
Mhm.
to be October 19th and 20th. And we are going to be doing a theme of diversity this year. So, yeah, I'm sure there will be lots of organizations hosting. And so, many different ways in which you can join or get involved, depending on, whose party you want to be part of. So Erin, when you were at the hybrid conference in 2020, tell us a little bit about like how you joined and what your experience and what you were part of, because you have been a speaker at the conference in the past.
Yeah, yeah. So this was, I think, my first time as a participant, because I've spoken previously, as you said. So it was great. I actually joined the local AVA of one of my colleagues, who I think maybe on this meeting from our Brantford group, our Brantford AVA Brava, with my friend Lynn. And she was very generous to share the link and join. Just as Faiza said, it's so easy to hook up with some people. We had a really great day, and it was so interesting to be on the other side. Faiza and I have been involved a couple times on the back end. So we see the green screens, and we see all the technical stuff. So it was really fascinating, and it was so nice to hear the conversations that were taking place, and how the presentations were inspiring and challenging people to really reflect and to think differently, about something that, we all know about risk, and risk is, risk management is a big part of what we learn and what we do in volunteer engagement. But we often just don't think about risk solely itself as a topic, or as we just talked about, Faiza, we think about it always in the negative and the preventative and the avoidance or punishment aspect. So it was a really refreshing way to flip that mindset and those mental models that we often have.
Yeah, and for those of you who haven't attended a hybrid conference before, the reason that it's hybrid is because there's a few different learning modalities that are used for the conference. So, as an attendee to the conference, you are watching a live stream where the presenters each take a turn, one at a time, to present an idea that they have. They have about 20 minutes to do so, and they present an idea that they have in relation to the theme. And then the live stream goes off, and then you join whatever local community you are with, whether it's in person or for most sites in 2020 online. So in your little Zoom rooms, and then you have some questions that the presenter has prepared. And then as a group, you take some time to go through those questions and have some discussion about what you've just heard. And then you come back to the live stream, and all four panelists and the host have a panel discussion based on what the presenter has presented. So at this year's conference, there were four presenters. First, there was Lori Gottlieb. Lori's up here and on the screen in pink. And Lori really took us through the volunteer cycle and basically talked about all the different things that you needed to think about through all the different parts of the volunteer cycle. And then we heard, and Lori is based in York Region in Ontario. And then we heard from Lindsay Baker. Lindsay is the president of Volunteer Management Professionals Canada. She's the board chair president there. And Lindsay also works for Oceanwise, which is part of the Vancouver Aquarium. And she did a really interesting session on pilot programs and you know, I loved what she had to say about taking a risk or presenting a new idea and doing it in a way that might feel safe for others by doing it in the context of a pilot program. And so she took us through the different steps in putting together a program and where to think about risk. And gave us a couple case studies of how she had put this into practice, which I think was really interesting. It gave people a framework that they could follow. And next was Jennifer Bennett from the Bay Area in California. And Jennifer works with Volunteer Match. She's the director of training and volunteers there. And Jennifer talked about soft risk. So what are some of the risks that are hiding in your volunteer engagement? She gave a really great example of a volunteer in a pet adoption program who basically lied to some interested potential adoptee parents and said, I think it was something like, if you don't adopt this pet, it's going to get euthanized or something like that.
Yeah.
And she talked about the soft risk that was involved in this volunteer basically lying, and how to mitigate that and how to think about that. And then lastly was Sarah Olivieri from Pivot Ground Consulting. And Sarah is someone who works with executives and not-for-profits, not necessarily with leaders of volunteers, but mostly the CEOs, directors of finance, and directors of operation. And Sarah talked about thinking about risk in a different way when working with people. And she talked about, instead of thinking of your role as managing people, she talked about managing outcomes versus managing people. So, that's a very quick and brief overview of what was presented at the conference. And so what we would like to do is share some of the learnings that we had at the conference, both Erin and I, myself from the perspective of having been able to speak to the presenters prior to the conference, during the conference, and throughout the day. So, and Erin, in her perspective as a participant in the conference, which some of you were as well. So without further ado, let's take us to our first lesson learned. And Erin, this was one of your lessons. And so take us through what you mean when you say that one of the things you came away with was that the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Yeah. It was really, it was almost like a meta experience to be to be participating in a conference on risk management right in the midst of a pandemic. And for many of us, there was still a lot of newness. Some of us were just kind of coming to the realization that, this isn't just a little blip. This is going to be sticking around for a while. And we were really wrapping our minds around, what does this mean? What does this look like? What is our new reality? And just something I had been hearing and something I'd been feeling was, that you know, there was just a lot of new on a lot of levels, and every day seemed new. And so, you know, there's exhaustion when you don't know what's really coming down the pipe. And so many of us, even if our jobs had been shifted or changed, you know, everybody was going nonstop. So that, you know, so people were tired, mentally you know, physically, emotionally. And so, you know, it was really interesting to be in that moment and to hear from colleagues and peers, when we're talking about, you know, risk. You know, when we think of, as we've just been saying, like, you know, we always go to that kind of like negative, you know, mental model, you know, and then in the midst of a pandemic when the stakes are so high, and for some of us, you know, like I said, we know about risk, we think about risk, but not at the level, and maybe not with the level of focus, that the pandemic really brought about for us. And so, you know, we were tired. And so, especially with Lori's presentation, it was actually a really big, okay, I've got this, because, you know, everything that she went through just reinforced that, you know, all of the basic practices and the rationale behind why we do a lot of what we do. It is around risk management. We're a very risk management oriented profession in how we've, you know, designed our business practices. But it just really made me feel like, you know, this is maybe a different flavor, to what my day-to-day life looks like, and what kinds of things I need to think about at work. But really, essentially, good practice is good practice, either because it addresses risk, or, you know, eliminates bias, or all the other things that we're, you know, that we're thinking about. Good practice is good practice, and we have a lot of good practices, in, you know, already in our tool belts that we employ, that we use in how we lead volunteer involvement in our organizations. And so for me, it was really, you know, yeah, you know, things feel like they're changing a mile a minute, and that things look completely the opposite of how they normally would. But really, you know, the more things change, the more they stay the same. So that was my kind of big aha, and it was really needed, and it was very appreciated. So it was great to start the conference off that way, because it gave me a sense of confidence that, okay, yes, like, I've got this, we've got this, we do have things in place, we do have resources and skills to address the kind of risks that we're facing right now. And we've got a track record. You know, we've addressed and mitigated a lot of risks, and also, you know, as the other presentations started talking about, taken the positive, you know, flip side of risk, and taken good risks and smart risks. And a lot of us advocated for smart risks from our organizations, by continuing to involve volunteers. So yeah, so it was the more things change, the more they stay the same.
I agree with you, Erin. It was really, you know, it was definitely a confidence booster to listen to everyone talk about their successes, right? And how, even though people had pandemic fatigue, a lot of it wasn't necessarily around the work side of it. It was, you know, dealing with it personally, dealing with lockdowns, dealing with, you know, for a lot of people in our profession, having to be on the front line and just not knowing about this virus, and the uncertainty. But when it came down to involving volunteers, you're exactly what you said. We had so much in place that it was easy to either move forward, increase services, pivot services, because there are so many wonderful foundations already in place. Right. So the second learning for me, so after doing this conference for 2 days, you know, one of the questions that came up after every single speaker, every single day was, well, how do I get buy-in? Yeah. And, you know, after hearing it for the sixth or seventh time on the second day, it just started to irk me. And, you know, I started to ask the question back, like, what permission is it that you really need to do the things you have to do as a leader of volunteers, because that is who you are. And when it comes to advocating for your volunteer partners. there seemed to be this theme of people needing to ask for permission, to do the things that you're paid to do, or to do the things that you are charged to do in your job with the leadership that you have. And I was kind of wondering, like, where is this need to ask for permission really coming from? And so I wanted to think about it differently, to say, like, what permission do you really need, and what is really up to you to get to do and to get done. And it was really interesting to hear about, I don't know how this conversation would have gone if we weren't in a pandemic, but it was interesting to hear about how quickly um, a lot of leaders of volunteers were able to take advantage of technology, where their organizations, previously would shy away from that and had been nervous about that. And they didn't need to
Yeah.
wait for permission. It was kind of a directive, like, you have to do this. And for some people, these
Yeah.
tools or ways of connecting had been things that they had been wanting to do for a long time, in terms of
Exactly.
accessibility to volunteer training, or to, doing volunteer screening online, or getting together and have meetings online instead of in person. A lot of people had been trying to make this move, and due to some organizations' discomfort with technology, which was really stemmed in just not knowing enough about it. A
Yeah.
lot of people were able to just take the reins and just go and not need permission. And I know that in my work at the YMCA, there was no time to ask for permission, right? There was stuff that needed to get done
Yeah.
to respond to this pandemic, new services that we needed to really quickly ramp up and be able to deliver. And then also, reach out to the community to ask, can you help us with this? We need volunteers to help us do this. There was no time to ask
Yeah.
for permission around many things, especially around, the things around risk. We didn't have time to do, the highest level of police background check, 3 reference checks,
Yeah.
2 interviews, and all of the training. We had to move really quickly, and really trust our instincts, and have had less incidents in the midst of a pandemic, with um, fewer screenings and fewer tools in place to mitigate risk, than usual. What about for you, Erin? Is this something that resonates with you at all?
Yeah, well, definitely. And what I loved, about your kind of second learning here is, it really, it flips that idea, of risk from, well, do I need permission, or how do I get permission, to what permission do you really need? And so again, it was very empowering, to think about it. It's a simple flip, right? And I think because we have good bones, good foundations in place, it allowed many of us to move forward and not actually expose our organizations to additional risks, because we knew what we were capable of, we knew what was needed, because so many of us work on the front lines, and we know the volunteers, that we have access to, and their capacities, and their skill sets, and their interests. And so it really was, I think, such a beautiful opportunity, to seize that, and to really demonstrate all the things that volunteer engagement can be. Yeah. And so, I mean, for me, that led into kind of the third,
Let
oh
me
yeah,
just
yeah,
add one more thing here.
yeah,
The other thing that I think is really important is that if you're always asking for permission to do the work that you need to do,
yeah,
there is a risk in not moving forward, and there is a
yeah,
risk in not taking action. And I think that there's nothing like a pandemic. I say it like it happens all the time, but like,
yeah,
there's nothing like this pandemic to really highlight that.
yeah,
If you are waiting around to ask for permission, if you're waiting for, someone to tell you how to do the work that you are uniquely qualified to do,
yeah,
there is a risk in not taking action. And an example for me at the Y is that, we've never been in the business of food security at my YMCA. I know other YMCA's in North America and around the world to do that, but at mine, it's not a business we got into. The city that we live in have other organizations that do that.
Yeah.
But, in some of the communities where our YMCA locations are, we needed to all of a sudden develop these pop-up food banks. And the need for these food banks, started small, but within the fourth or fifth week, we were seeing 500% attendance increasing in terms of the need of the community for these food banks. And so they've now all become permanent food banks. And we had to respond really quickly and be able to get them up and running, get them approved by public health, have volunteers in place to support them. And I didn't have time to even let my boss know this was happening. It just had to happen. And
Yeah.
about a month into the food banks, are being in place, I was like, oh yeah, by the way, they are staffed 95% by volunteers. And she was like, great. She didn't even ask
Yeah.
about the work. And I know that I'm looking at Elizabeth Garabrandt, and I know that for her, in working in food security, you just had to move and mobilize people and work really, 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 really quickly. So there is a risk when you wait for permission and
Yeah.
you don't take an action as well. And so I think I say that to say that trust in your practice, trust in the skills that you have that are unique to you and in your professionalism. And don't wait for I say, like, beg forgiveness after, like, go for it and then ask for
Yeah.
forgiveness later versus asking for permission, which has served me well. I've hardly ever gotten in trouble, but don't say that to my husband because he will tell you something different. um, all right, so our third learning, is, I know something, Erin, that you are really passionate about, that always boils down to people. So what does that mean for you?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think this is, and I appreciate you adding those extra comments because it just reinforces, I think, the segue between, what permission do you really need, and the role, when we really think about what is the purpose of volunteer engagement, and what role do we fulfill, what unique place do we occupy in our organizations? And so for me, it really kind of evolved into this. It always boils down to people. And, I think one of the things, the example that you shared about the food banks is such a perfect example of, you know, typically, and Susan Ellis, loved saying this, that we were the busybodies of the nonprofit world, right? But for me, I don't think of it as busybodiness. To me, what I talk about is, we see 360 degrees. Like, we have a very unique lens in our organizations that we see the totality, typically because volunteers are involved in so many areas. And so we're able to bring together sometimes very disparate things and make them happen. We can be that bridge in our organizations. And going back to the initial, learning. And as you said, Faiza, like, have confidence, like we have this, and we have a really important role to play, and we have the skills and the professionalism to do it. And so then, this third learning for me is, as you said, like, I'm very passionate. I've got a really big bugaboo, is that we tend to focus too often in our profession on the administrative side of things. And not that we don't need those things, but it's, to me, it's less about the paperwork and the processes and more about the quality of a volunteer's experience with our organization. It's like, when they sometimes I read those articles that come out about, we interviewed, 700 people at a hospice about, what they wish they spent less time on. And it's always work. It's always paperwork and house cleaning. And, nobody is going to walk away from a volunteer experience with you saying, that was the best damn volunteer application form I've ever filled out. Right. Like, that's not what people are thinking about or what they're remembering. They might remember if it was a giant pain in the butt, and you might lose them because of that. But, as you had kind of mentioned, Sarah's presentation really talked about, instead of managing people, we manage outcomes. And that was a really kind of cool idea, because our processes should be about empowering people, not the other way around. Really, like whatever we design should be elegant and effective enough that it really is inspiring to people, that it reaffirms every step of the way that, yes, this is where I want to give my only non-renewable resource, my time, and especially right now when people are so many of us are facing additional kind of stresses and demands, right? And there's more challenges. There's lineups at the grocery store, or we may be taking care of family members who are a higher risk. And so, we don't want them going out. We're doing their groceries, we're doing their laundry, we're doing porch drops, or we've got children at home. Faiza and I often talk about our children. She has 2 gorgeous little boys, and I have 4 cats and a 120-pound dog. So not exactly the same demands, but you would be surprised how similar
Sleep
I find, at
deprived
least.
I was going to say, you'd be surprised how sleep deprived the 2 of us both are, but yeah.
And for me, like when we talk about it boiling down to people and that really being our focus, it made me think about, and this is another thing that if anyone's ever listened to me talk, that I rant about this constantly, but it's like volunteer hours and volunteer numbers. We use these metrics as examples of, how much value we're bringing to the organization and the work that we're doing. And this was a perfect storm where, guess what? In some cases, there's no volunteers, and there's no volunteer hours because either the programs couldn't pivot or hadn't pivoted, or or there was a resistance and a bit of a lull, and so for me, like if really what we're intending to do is to connect community resources and talents with the mission of our organization, then we have to think about, is everything we're doing so in a way that's going to empower and engage people to support our mission? And it's really volunteers that create the outcomes of, depths of relationships, and when we talk about, you were talking about asking for permission, and one of the takeaways I had from Lindsay's presentation about pilots is what I loved. She actually shared an example of a pilot that failed, which I thought was awesome, because it didn't fail to me. And, it was really, she proved, actually, this isn't the best way to do something. But a lot of that depends on having great relationships, and how you're connecting with people, not just with volunteers, but also with your peers. And so, Faiza, what you just said about you not even mentioning to your boss until a few months in with the food bank, and there was no questions because you had built up that relationship, right? There was that trust there. You demonstrated your value in a number of different ways. So for me, that was kind of that big messy ball kind of all gelled down into it always boils down to people.
Yeah, and when you talk to me about it always boiling down to people, there's 2 things that come to mind for me. So one is, if you are someone that does need permission or does have someone that you're reporting to, flex your social capital and flex your understanding of what Erin says about having that 360 degree. Like when I'm going to my supervisor and I have information that she doesn't have, and I can say that, well, when I spoke to the communications team, or when I spoke to the newcomer immigrant services team, this is what they told me, and it's information that she doesn't have access to. All of a sudden, I'm getting phone calls from her in the middle of the day, like, what's your pulse on X, and what do you think this team's resistance would be, or their aversion would be to this idea? Because the way that engaging volunteers is usually positioned in an organization is that you do have to be able to work across the entire organization and have relationships with everybody. And there are no other, I know my finance team has that in terms of they have connections with everybody, but they don't have connections to the work. And there are no other teams that are connected to the work. Every other team that in my organization that supports everybody else is an administrative team, and which we are, but that's only a little bit of what we do.
Yeah.
The second thing, when it talks about that it always boils down to people, and I know for a lot of people, when Sarah Olivieri was talking about, think about managing outcomes versus managing people. So instead of focusing on, this is the number of volunteers we had, and these are the hours that they did. She talked about being able to prove the impact of what volunteers were bringing to the table. And I love that idea, but I think there's a small danger in that idea, in that if you are managing outcomes, you'll find the easiest way to get those outcomes met. And usually the easiest way to get those outcomes met are by going to people who have access to volunteering. And so
Yeah.
the only issue I had with the managing outcomes versus managing people is sort of what happens to that equity lens, and what happens to involving volunteers, attracting volunteers, making your organization a safe place for volunteers, where it might not be as easy for them to volunteer with you because of the things that your organization has put in place to make it more difficult. And so again, what that really is telling you, that it does always boil down to people. And so if you're going to take this lens of managing outcomes versus managing people, then one of your outcomes needs to be around who those people are, and what you want your volunteer base to look like. All right. So our last learning before we start to learn from you is actually something that I've been seeing a lot lately in the news. Erin, where'd you get this quote from? Never waste a good crisis. Where'd you get this from?
It's a famous quote from I want to say a politician from years and years ago, but I'm trying to I'm totally blanked, but I will look it up. Give me 2 seconds.
So what we mean when we talk about never wasting a good crisis is kind of a wrap up of everything that we've really talked about here. That there is a risk in not taking action. There is, when you think about soft risk, the process needs to be less about. The process needs to be more. Your volunteer process needs to be more about supporting your volunteers versus making sure. Versus protecting the brand of your organization, right? And if you are focusing more, less on the number of reference checks, the number of, things that prove that this person is worthy of volunteering with you, and that is so problematic on its own. If your process is more about supporting the person to do a great job, and less about less about risk, you will have success there. And I think, Erin, when we were talking about never wasting a good crisis, is that there is an opportunity in crisis, and that there is an opportunity in, the example of Lindsay failing a pilot that goes wrong, right?
Yeah.
And, I think that one of the biggest lessons that I've learned throughout my career is to say when something goes wrong, like, hey, that didn't go the way I thought it was going to go, but here's what we're going to put in place next time, or here's the learning that came from that, or here's the practice that we need to stop because that contributed to this being a failure.
Yeah, I think there's a really beautiful freedom, to test things out, to push the limits, to, and we kind of alluded to this earlier, was, we were able, for years and years, so many of us have been trying to push things forward, to do online training, or, more cloud-based stuff, or get more volunteers involved remotely or virtually. And then that became the only option. And so we were able to push so much stuff forward. So I think there is a beautiful freedom in pushing limits during a crisis, in a way that can be very beneficial. And that's definitely something that I felt we were able to move things forward. So I really, I appreciate your comments, Faiza, because, it does allow, I also think, a bit of, I don't know, just maybe wiggle room to fail, to say, hey, things are crazy right now. Let's try this, right? And that's exciting too.
Most definitely. All right. So the next thing that we are going to do through the magic and support of Heidi is I'm going to put you into small groups again. I think, Heidi, 4 people in a room for 15 minutes. And the question that we want to ask is, pre-COVID, what were you doing well as a leader of volunteers that really helped you to navigate the pandemic? When I see the amount of volunteering that has continued, that has pivoted, that has gone online, it could only have done so if there were a lot of things that were going well. Because when I see the number of retail and stores and businesses that have had to completely shut down and haven't been able to pivot and respond, but then when I see how the charitable sector, hasn't, completely
Yeah.
shut down, obviously we've had some losses, but not as many as others. We are doing a lot of things right. And so in your small groups, when Heidi gives you the signal, talk about that pre-COVID. What were you doing well as a leader of volunteers that helped you navigate the pandemic? And we'll see you back here in 15 minutes. Hey, Heidi, are you there?
Heidi had to run and give her husband a spare key. He locked his keys in the car. So this is Meredith. So I'm managing the breakout rooms.
Okay, I think something happened with the breakout rooms and we ended up with like 2 and 3 people per room.
Okay.
So could we, for the next breakout room, just do like 4 rooms total?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yes.
How many people are on the call? I don't even know.
Let's see. I think when we were all together, it looked like 29.
Okay, yeah. So we can do like 4 rooms
Okay, sure.
instead of like 4 people per room because it didn't work out.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you.
Sure.
I'm like messaging Heidi. I'm like, I don't think she's there. Oh,
Yeah, she said she didn't want to interrupt you.
Oh yeah, no, that's like a panicky thing that happens.
Do you want me to give people like a minute warning to come back?
Yeah, let's give them, I think they've been in their rooms for 9. Yeah, let's give them a minute now. Yeah, let's give them a minute now and then we'll be able to have more time in the second one.
Okay, you ready for me to bring them all back?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, welcome back everyone. And Diane Werner, I just wanted to wave to you. I got your email earlier today and I will get back to you. All right, so as we're waiting for people to come back, just take a minute to pop over to Menti again. And this time you are going to answer the question, pre-COVID, how comfortable was your organization with taking risks with volunteers? Oh, I think people are still coming back. So as you're coming back, so as you're popping back into the main room here, pop on over to Menti. We have another poll for you. So real quick poll before we jump into our next discussion. So once again, you're going to go to menti.com and use the code. And we're just going to get a bit of a pulse here. Pre-COVID, how comfortable was your organization taking risks with volunteers? Erin, where would you say your organization kind of fell on this chart here? I'm going to say I would rate my organization a 6. 6 out of 10. What would you say yours would be, Erin?
Apologies, I didn't realize I was muted there. Yeah, I'd say we're about a 5. Like, we're a large national health charity, very old. We're fairly bureaucratic historically, and so we are. It's funny, like we are very innovative in many ways, but I think the volunteer involvement is very traditional.
Yeah.
To that area, and Tully agrees with me, so we've got an extra vote there. No, you can't use the Menti. I've already voted for us. But yeah, so I would say, yeah, we're middle of the pack, very much kind of where I'm seeing on the screen everybody else is.
Awesome. All right. So it looks like we've had, yeah, so really interesting to see pre-COVID. So would that tell you again, pre-COVID, how comfortable organizations were with taking risk for with volunteers. So interesting to see, like really in the middle of, you know, when we average out all the responses, it's great to see that there are some people answering
Yeah,
comfortable and you know, would be really interested to talk one-on-one with people. So if you're in a breakout room with someone that you think fell onto this spectrum, you know, make sure you grab their information and make a commitment to each other to just catch up for 15 or 20 minutes and talk to them about the culture of that organization or what's in place that makes that, you know, that makes it so.
yeah. Well, and I mean, this is pre-COVID, right? So
Yeah.
I wonder how much of the needle would move for those people, both, you know, kind of on both outliers, right?
Absolutely, yeah. All right, we are going to do one last. Well, actually, Erin, when it in the small group discussions, did anybody want to quickly share anything that came out from that discussion, from the last discussion that was just had? I don't know if anyone wants to. Feel free to unmute and just share if there was anything that came out of that.
Just checking the chat to see if, or if you don't feel comfortable unmuting, feel free to pop something into the chat. And just while we're seeing if anybody types anything, that quote is from Winston Churchill: "Never let a good crisis go to waste."
I appreciated my breakout room buddies lamenting with me all together. It was nice.
Yeah, sometimes it's good to know that you're not in this alone, right? And that others are having, you know, similar experiences to you or can relate to you. Even if they're not having that experience right now, they can relate to what that's like. All right, so Meredith, we're going to do only 4 breakout rooms this time because I think some of our rooms were quite small last time. Let me just see what was it popped into the chat there. Somebody.
Karina's got to run. Bye, Karina. Nice to see you.
So in your small group discussions, so when it comes to volunteer engagement, we are 10 months into this pandemic. We have all learned so much. What risks are you more willing to take now? You know, what are the things that you have more confidence around, have more experience with? What risks are you willing to take now? And if you want to indulge your participants, sort of why are you more willing? So if we could do Meredith, 4 rooms would be great, please. All right, Erin. So we are at 6:46. So I say we do like no more than 10 minutes in here, and then we have our last poll, and then we can do some Q&A or something if there are people that want to do that, and then that'll take us to 7. Does that work for you? You can just do a thumbs up if you don't want to unmute.
Yeah, no, sorry, I was trying to mute because it's Tully's dinner time and she's being obnoxious.
Do you want to run out, or do you want to feed her real quick?
Yeah, no. I'm good. She's settled. I've said zippy the lippy. She's that's the problem with having such a large dog, is when she has something to say, like her mother, she says it forcefully.
Yeah. It's bath time over here, so I feel like some like new children are gonna come running through here at any point because they take a bath in our bathroom in our bedroom. how was your rooms? Both your breakout rooms were the same people?
Yeah, really nice. And you know, we all work in really kind of different areas and different organizations, so that, you know, made for really interesting conversation and yeah, like just very different perspectives, and yet we could all kind of like come together on some things, which was cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, which
Well,
is I
that's
think the
good.
beauty of these conversations, right? So yeah.
Yeah,
How about
and
you?
there's
Did
so
you join any of the
no,
conversations?
I didn't join it just so I
Okay.
could like keep track on the time and like see if
Yeah.
anything was coming in the chat. Um, I think that's like the beauty of all of this online learning. It's like I do feel exhausted by it sometimes, just like
Yeah.
sitting and not being as physical during the day. But like I've had the chance to talk to so many people,
Yeah.
you know, and hear about like what does volunteer engagement look like in all these different contexts, which I would have
Yeah.
the chance to do. And then with the CCVA work, like reading all these different renewal essays that come in. So there's a woman on the call, Elizabeth Garabrandt, who works in food security. Like she had to call out the National Guard and like, you know, like lobby government to like get them to send the National Guard so that she could run her food bank. Like
Wow.
amazing.
Yeah, well, and what a perfect example of like just like what permission do you need to ask for,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
just you have people that you're, you know, often usually people is who we're supporting, but yeah, you've got people counting on you.
Yeah, you can't wait.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
There's some really, I was just asked recently, you know, like about some examples of, you know, cool things that people are doing, and I'm like, how much time do you have? Like there's
Yeah.
some, you know, it's been really amazing to see how some people are stepping up and I think even surprising themselves.
Yep. You were telling me about your conversation yesterday,
Yeah.
being asked that question. So what examples were you giving?
Well, I actually I talked about you, and how you're really connecting.
Oh, the office
Well,
bed is the newest
yeah.
thing. Working in your pajamas.
No, just you know, like how you're connecting, you're really I mean, to me, this is coming like full circle, right? Is really connecting volunteering as a human right, and as, you know, community engagement, which like we know that stuff, but what does that mean for our practices? Because we've really professionalized volunteering and really, I think, in some unhealthy ways, put it on a pedestal
Yeah.
and made it really well, I mean, like all the barriers, right? And I think that that's something that we really have to like, to me, that's one of the next biggest things we need to be reconciling, in conjunction with the white womanness of the profession, right? Like because to me, I think those things are definitely tied and connected.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad you get it, because sometimes I talk about that stuff and people are not understanding it. Like
Yeah.
I was having some conversations with people yesterday. They're like, "Oh my God, weren't you so excited by the inauguration?" And I was like, yeah, I allowed myself one day to just be excited and unclench a little bit, but you know,
Yeah.
it's the same system that put Trump in place is the same system that put
Yeah.
Joe Biden in place, and he's a human being, and I like a lot more about him than I do for Trump, but he's not perfect, right? And he's
No.
benefited from a system that's set up to
Yeah.
make him succeed, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he
Today,
wasn't.
I'm like, you know, yesterday was fun and hopeful, and I cried. You know, I cried in the inauguration. I cried at the fireworks last night with Katy Perry. Oh my goodness, did you see that?
No,
Oh my
no.
gosh.
I was just like stunned by Amanda, the poet laureate. Unbelievable.
Yep, yep.
Unbelievable.
She stole the show for sure.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And I had like I had such a good moment when I saw a tweet by Greta Thunberg. She
Yes.
just burned Trump so hard, and I'm like, I love people with Asperger's.
She did it for the
Because
second
I'm just
time.
like, they like give no Fs. Like,
Yeah, she did that for the second time, which I loved. Okay,
It's beautiful.
Meredith, can we close down the rooms, give people their 60 seconds?
You got it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Meredith.
Yeah, we have so much work to do. I'm
Yeah.
interested to see how the next hybrid conference is going to go, because like with the diversity theme, just with the
Yeah.
people who are in charge of it, it's not a very diverse group. So I'm interested to
No.
see how it will go. I asked to help with the selection of speakers, but
Oh, good.
I don't know if that's going to happen.
I think they'd be silly not to take you up on that generous offer.
Yeah, see what happens. My house smells so good right now. Irvin made cheeseburgers for the kids.
Oh, nice.
Smell it coming from like under the door. I'm like, oh, it smells good.
And are you going to have a cheeseburger waiting for you?
I need to exercise. I think I need to like, just for my own mental health, get out and get
Yeah.
a walk, or like just get some movement going. Welcome back, everybody.
Hello.
Welcome back. All right, great to have everybody back. So as we wrap up today, I'm going to ask you all, just if there's somebody that you want to connect with more, myself and Erin included, or someone that you want to, if there's a piece of the conversation that was cut short because our breakout rooms ended, please, make those matches in the chat box, and take that risk in asking that person for their email address, their digits, their number. My high school self was dating myself here. Yeah, my husband was saying, like, my husband is younger than me and his siblings are younger than him, and he was saying, like, you don't ask people for their number anymore, you ask them for like their TikTok handle, or and that's how you court people these days. Court people, who says that? Okay, so
Who's old now, Irvin? Who's old now?
We are so thankful that all of you were able to join us today. And really what we hope that you got out of today is that there is so much skill and so much knowledge already in what you do, especially when it comes to taking risks. Sit down and take that inventory of what your skills are, what your strengths are, what capital and what do you bring to the organization that nobody else can bring. Think about what Erin said about having that 360 vision, having that connection to the community, those boots on the ground, that real understanding of the need that is there, the understanding of your colleagues, the different teams, the culture, and that happens on all the different teams. Or, if you're in a smaller organization, what each of your coworkers' strengths and challenges are and how you can support them. And, we want to end, real quick with our friend Menti one more time and ask you, professionally, what have you learned that you might not have if it hadn't been for COVID? What would you say, Erin? What was something that you have learned that you might not have?
I mean, it's not a learning per se, but it's a more, I think what COVID allowed me to do was to connect even more broadly and even more deeply with colleagues from around the world, and really build some connections that that I never would have been able to build, like this. I think people, we learned how easy it is truly to connect when we are eager to, and when we really want to make it happen. So that was a beautiful thing for me.
Yeah, for me, the thing that I think I knew, qualitatively I knew, anecdotally I knew just how interconnected volunteering and mental health is. For some of my volunteers who are seniors, when I think about when I think about them in March and when I think about them now, just seeing the decline in their health, and I think you and
Yeah.
I were texting about this the other day, Erin,
Yeah.
about how the isolation, COVID is taking, not just the virus is not taking people away, but the isolation that this
Yeah.
virus has bred is really causing a lot of suffering. And I'm seeing that most definitely with some of my older volunteers or some of my
Yeah.
volunteers with health issues that are really, really isolated and, can't even do some of the things that I take a lot of joy in, like going for a walk,
Yeah.
getting some exercise. And so that connection between volunteering, and I would say it's not even volunteering, it's the connection between being able to have agency in your own
Yes.
community and have a feeling of being able to influence your community, whether that be by
Yeah.
volunteering, by community development, by taking on leadership, and mental health really go hand in hand. And when people count on that for their mental health and it's not there, I'm seeing the effects of that.
Yeah, and I think for me, like, just like I I mean, this wasn't a new revelation, but I think it just reinforced for me, um, never think that what we do is fluff or isn't important. Like, what we do is fundamental to society and to
Absolutely.
quality of life and to just everything that makes life worth living. So there is a responsibility that I felt through COVID because without volunteers, many of our programs either have been shut down or put on hold or significantly reduced, which means we're able to help fewer people or animals or whomever it is that that our mission is tied to. But like you just said, it's not just the volunteers and their outcomes and their outputs, but it's also themselves and their well-being. So never doubt that what you do is incredibly important.
Absolutely. And I'm just kind of looking at all of the different comments on the screen.
Yeah.
And, what I'm seeing is a theme of, oh, somebody said got my CVA. And so to you, I say,
Yeah.
woo-hoo.
Yeah.
And if you want to learn more about the CVA, go to cvacert.com. That is the equivalent of me saying my album drops, but instead my CVA. But what I'm seeing is I'm seeing a lot around technology and connection, and just
Yeah.
how important connection is. And one of the things that I am 1042% confident about is that when we are post COVID, I think that we need to be prepared. We need to start future proofing for. I think that there is going to be a tsunami of people who want to help in their community. Not only
Yeah.
because I think that people are seeing the effects of COVID on their loved ones, their families, on communities that they care about. They are seeing what it means when services are not essential or deemed not
Yeah.
essential or taken away. For me, working at a YMCA, hearing from people how much they miss being able to exercise, to lead, outside of their home, and what that does for their mental health. I've seen that. I think that there are going to be a lot of people in transition,
Yep.
from employment, from school,
Yeah.
from relationships ending, from moving, from all of those things, that are going to be looking for a way to use their skills, to connect with their community, to give back to the things that are important to them. We need to be prepared for that. So,
Yeah.
if for some of us that have had to, shut things down or put a pause on things, um, I'm confident that when that tsunami comes, everything that we already know what to do, right? We've done it
Yeah.
before, we know what to do, and we will be able to do a great job. And we now have a comfort with technology and tools that are going to
Yeah.
help us to do that even more efficiently.
And I think some of the other conversations that have started over the past year about diversity, equity, justice, and inclusion are some things that we have to carry on, right? Because it's not just enough to say, well, everything's online now. It's, well, we know that not everybody that we want to connect with is online, right? So it's,
Right.
I think it's also, I think, a more nuanced understanding of how do we welcome and how are we welcoming to everyone? So I think that's a really important piece too.
Absolutely. All right. So Erin, it was such a pleasure to chat with you tonight and to
Always.
share our observations and our learning. And Liza, thank you for mentioning in the comments that volunteering was highlighted last night as part of the US presidential inauguration. So I think we're going to be seeing more people inspired to do something. And I agree with you, Liza. I think that it's only a matter of time until it's safe for us to be able to do as much as we were able to do pre-COVID. I don't know if anyone has any questions. Feel free to come off mute. And Erin and I can stick around for a couple minutes if that's okay with you. Meredith and Heidi, we'll stick around for a couple more minutes. Otherwise, thank you for being with us today. Thank you for sharing your expertise and your learnings, and let's keep this conversation going. Stand in what we are, in what we are skilled at, and own the unique skills and the unique perspective that we have in our organizations.
Thank you so much, Faiza and Erin. Thank you for this presentation, for the learnings. And I know I already wrote on a little post-it by my computer, what permission do you really need? I think that is a good thing to remember as we go in and get our work done. So thank you everybody for coming and for being here.
Thank you all. Have a great night.
You.
And if you have any questions, we'll stick around for a few minutes.
Yeah, and reach out. You've got our contact information. There's some great thank you.
Scout.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Scout. Scout, they say goodbye.
Bye, Scout.
Bye, Scout.
I was waiting for Scout to say goodbye to Tully when she started talking up there.
She was barking quite a bit.
Yeah.
Well, okay, Scout says goodbye. There he is.
Oh, goodbye, Scout.
Bye.
So cute.
Bye. Thank you very much. This was great. Thanks.
Thanks.
David,
Thank you.
good to see you again, David.
Nice to see you. Bye.
Take care. Bye, David.
I am so sorry that I had to leave, but
No worries. I was like, what
Glad
a
it
panicky thing to have to happen. Meredith had to go and somebody was locked out and she had to go get keys to them.
Oh, no.
yeah, my husband locked himself out of his car while he was at a client's apartment for work. He works for the Southern Arizona AIDS Foundation. Anyways, so he was just
Oh my
at this
goodness.
like random building. He's like, can you come? Anyway, here we are and we're fine. And thank you, Meredith, for covering. And
Thanks.